Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica Brunecki, and I'm Director of Damn Contemporaries. Welcome to our Logan lecture tonight, featuring Lawrence Argent. I would be pleased if you would join Lawrence and our group after the talk for further conversation at Mad Beans and Wine, which is located just across the plaza out the main door. Complimentary snacks and a cash bar will be available. I'd like to begin by taking a moment to thank Vicki and Kent Logan for their very generous and ongoing support of this series. This spring, we have decided to introduce an exciting new format by inviting individuals from the Denver arts community to introduce each artist in the series. Tonight, we are delighted to have Colleen Fanning introducing Lawrence Argent. Colleen served as Public Art Coordinator for the Mayor's Office and as Art Program Manager for Denver International Airport before forming her own public art consulting firm in 2007 called Fanning Partnership. At Fanning Partnership, she works with artists and corporations so that corporations can better incorporate public art into their world. Please join me in welcoming Colleen to the stage to say a few words about tonight's artist.
Hello, everyone. Gosh, what a nice crowd. So public art, after working in this field for quite a number of years, it's such an intriguing field. Any artist who endeavors to embark in making art for public spaces is a brave soul. For most artists who endeavor to make work in public spaces, there's a really good chance that they will not garner respect from art critics. And there's a really good chance that they probably will struggle finding a project every single year to sustain their livelihood. My curiosity is why? Why is this? And what makes an artist great? And what makes them worthy of us paying attention to them? So here's 5 considerations, formal criteria that I believe most great artists incorporate. So their work reflects the values and the culture from which it comes. The art object has a profound sense of emotion and feeling that connects with us. They display a powerful use of their imagination. They understand their value. Their price reflects the level at which they have mastered these formal criteria. And they demonstrate mastery of their technique and their materials. Artists like Lawrence Argent create endearing works that delight and inspire us. His work questions the nature of our assumptions. It is not tied to the strict parameters of official rules, but instead gracefully delights us. Lawrence is willing to take risks and think outside the box for his clients. And he also instills much trust. And as you will see tonight when he talks, you will feel so confident that he could do the job for you. As a result, he elevates his client's image, leaving behind a highly talked about and loved mark, which resonates with a large population. His personality instills trust and confidence in him. Those who may never visit galleries or museums, public art is an amazing field for people to start a dialogue about what art is, what it can be. And so it is my great honor to introduce Lawrence Argent.
Is this on? Good. Thanks, Colleen. Thank you, Colleen. And thanks, everyone, for coming. This is a great crowd, and I see a lot of friends here in the audience, and thank you for your support. This is wonderful. I'd like to start out by saying a lot of you know me as the guy that has a blue bear tattoo on his chest. But I'm a little more than that, and I wanted to enlighten you to the other things that I do. And when Gwen asked me to talk about my work and some of the things, it was about materials and materiality. And I thought I'd start out by sharing some earlier pieces, some studio works that I did many, many years ago, but sort of imbue the same flavor and sentiment within how I carry through the mindset of how I work today. Because I'm really interested in how we perceive things, that process of what happens to something that seduces us, to ignite a process within our mind, and how that sort of ignites another passion to further explore something that we didn't know. And what is that? And so I've always been interested in sort of the nature of semiotics and the study of symbols and how we start to see those things. So if I said to you, here's a tree, you would go, okay, I have a tree up here. Well, I'm really interested in that version of your tree, but the tree that I triggered, that tree, is something that I have more fascination for. And I want to imbue that confidence in you as the spectator to be able to have that possibility to ignite something else. And that something else is not what I can preconceive. It's not something that I could foresee. It's just something that I think allows art to explore in the unconscious mind that we can permit it to have. So, ivory soap. Use motor oil. They conjure up things in us, right? They mean things. They smell. They do smell. The motor oil smells. The ivory soap smells. We can understand that nature of what that is. They're symbols. They're images of what I put there for you. But when I put them into a physicality, I have a vat of motor oil, use motor oil, because it's smelly. And it has amazing qualities of reflectivity. So it's reflecting what is hanging above there. The soap, it's a little overexposed here, but is a cowboy hat. It's a carved cowboy hat. And I don't know if you can see it in this one. Maybe you can see it a little bit better there. It's sitting on a bed of soap flakes. So the contrast between those elements, between what we see and what we smell, the senses that we have, are all part of how I like to play with how they enter our consciousness. The old used boxing gloves that once were in the ring had a life, had a history, had something to do with a sense of baggage that I don't really know what they were, but I can guess. And I think we all have an association with that of how we feel and respond to those. So I tried to set up these situations of contrast, perhaps contradictions that we could start to look at in a way that imbued another poetic license. I started out with some street sweeper brushes that I collect things. It's a problem. You know, it's a big problem. You should see my basement. I mean, and my wife is just as bad as I am. She's messier than I am, but you know, we do collect a lot of these things, and it is frightening what we have. But they seem to come out of something that we have a love for and appreciation for their history and the nature of what they were, what they functioned as. And once they're put into another sense of construct that I create, they lose that, but they become more powerful because of the nature of the placement that I put them in. So I didn't know what to do with these things for ages. They were in my garage, and I live in a neighborhood that actually has gone through some amazing transitions over time. And within that, I remember having them in the garage, and you know, the Hispanic neighbors would come by. Hey man, you gonna have a car wash in here? And I went, no. It's art. So, you know. And then I'm cutting away and manicuring these things like topiary bushes with my assistants, and you know, tendonitis and many trips to the doctor. I can see why they use these things as street sweepers. So I made this piece and started to think of, at the same time as this was being made, I had the birth of my first son. I didn't have the birth, my wife had the birth of my first son. And so this piece is called Cajones. So whatever it means to you, it means street sweeper brushes to me, but they like one's higher than the other, and it's great. So there we are. They became sensual in another way for their own objectivity, and they lost their sense of history of where they were, which I thought was kind of magical. And then it was sort of this defining nature that was very much like a topiary when I was cutting it, that made something in me look at this object in a very different way, but then looked at sort of forms and shapes in another way that I found very exciting. So here we have it. It was, and they're red. Other objects that stay around and still become part of my procurement of stuff is this old chair that I found, and this ladder that was a tree ladder, and this bucket I drilled holes in it with corks. There's a language. There's a language to the nature of what these things mean, what they mean to me, but I think they also have a universal within what they mean to other people, to other psyches of what's going on. So I started to think about the chair and the relationship of what this chair is and was. And I started to think, who sat on this chair? What sort of history does this chair wish to tell me? So I created and this is a long time ago before we have high definition video and all sorts of stuff, so excuse me. So the chair was telling a story. I was here. I was here. I was here. And for the kids in the audience, they may not want to see the next one. They did have to put a sign up when this piece was in the exhibit. I've sped these up because they were there for a long time. All right, you get the drift. It's a story. It's about what it has as a potency for the objectivity of what those things are. They were triggers for me, and something that I, was magically excited by the inherent language of associated subjectivity. One of my first public art projects, or larger public art projects, I should say, is this piece that I did for the University of Denver. I fought tooth and nail for this because I teach there, and the last thing I want to do is look at somebody else's work outside my window. So I wanted to do something really good. So I started to think about the idea about what education is. What do I do as a professor in the classroom? What do I share, and how do we listen? Those same things, that sense of process. What ignites the boredom, and I see it sometimes, the sleepiness in the classroom. And, what ignites that from that stage to something else? When we're sitting there and we're listening to somebody pontificate about something, we're in a mindset of thinking that we have to learn. And I started to think about the whole nature of what education is, what it was, and the process by which we acquire information. And within that, I thought, well, I have a challenge here. How do I do that? And where does all that stuff come from? Well, it comes from here. So in this piece, I have 4 gigantic benches that are the lips that are, we've got this magic pointer here, I know. So we have this one here. There's another one over on this side, one here and here. And actually, when you sit on these benches, they slowly emanate a sound. That sound could be a discussion from a rhetoric theory class. It could be somebody that we've had on campus visiting, giving a lecture. It could be a whole variety of different sets of information that you would not normally hear when you're outside, for one thing, but that maybe you would not normally allow to enter your consciousness because it may not have been of interest to you to listen. So I wanted to tweak that. I wanted to derail what we think we know, because the education system is like a 4-year track for an undergraduate degree. They have to take all these prerequisites for what they have to do. I'm going, okay, how do we facilitate this to be able to ignite the other possibility, perhaps of the other wonderful faculty that we have at the university, to engage in this conversation? And so I really wanted to try and, upset that equilibrium of the track and the prerequisites and all that sort of stuff. How do you, diffuse that already pre-wired knowledge. I think I need to know this and this is it. I was interested in, well, you don't know this, but maybe you're hearing it in either a conscious way when you sit down, because you're in a very different place when you sit down. You're listening. You're outside. Nature's there. You're starting to, oh, huh? What was that? Where's that coming from? You start to understand, and maybe in a different way. You may be ignoring it. And actually, you probably ignore it now because it's not working a lot of the time. So you do have a problem with that. But it is going to be working soon. I am informed. So it's all about how we receive that information. So it wasn't only about visual information. It was this auditory component. So I wanted to set up a dialogue between these lips here and the other 4 lips that we have that are these benches that you sit on. The interesting component, this is the grid where there's a sensor in there that triggers when you sit down, waits for a period of time, and then gives you the illuminations that I want you to listen to. Although we can change that over many years, and we have changed that over time. So many different possibilities within that. One of the things I do want to point out here is that these lips were actually cast from students' lips at the university, from a diverse population of students that were on campus. And you know, it was a very funny moment when I all had them lined up in the studio many different days, and they're laying down there. I said, well, I've got to pour this stuff on your mouth and cast them, and made these little rubber molds and then plaster backing for them and things. And then I made these little benches, and then we actually laser scanned them. And so we were able to, at that point in time, it was new for me. It was thinking about a different possibility about how I could actually make things, how I could visualize things, the transition between what I had worked in the studio and what I was starting to think about technology. And I've always been fascinated by how technology can be a tool, not a toy. And the tool to be able to enhance the creative possibility was something that I was really excited in. And that's what happened when I did this piece. It started with this work. So you can see the milling lines right across here. So this was milled on a CNC 5-axis stone machine, milling machine, with stone blades and so forth. And I decided to leave what we have there as the milling path, and you'll see it all in the columns as well. So when you go back and visit, if you're ever around there outside the Ritchie Center, you'll see that there is this texture to them. Not only is there a texture to them, but you'll start to see these facets, because the way we scan them is like scanning an image. If you scan it at 72 dpi, which is what you would put on here for your computer, your resolution is fairly low. But if you scan it higher, you get more detail. Well, I scanned it and we didn't get that much detail, so we ended up with facets. And I was interested in that slight abstraction of reality that makes you think of something in a very different way. And that's what happened when I looked and went to the facility that did this. There are a few projects, and I've eliminated a few projects actually because of time-wise. But I did this project in Fort Collins, brought on as a designer, and at one point in time, it was, I know early on when I need to bow out of certain things now. It's experience and not desperation for finally getting something done. But it ended up being. I remember the landscape architect in this conversation telling me that. Landscape architecture is an art, and I thought, well, the door's over there, I should go. Because I really believe it is art, and the nature of what architecture is as well. And I think, unfortunately, I was working with these people that had a very different mindset, but nonetheless, we had this relationship between how do I put this challenge together with dealing with an idea or a mindset of this that actually I find kind of interesting. So the challenge was there. And trying to think about how I could work with them on the creation of what we do with the Plaza, which is laid out like the city. And it's right next to the Museum of Contemporary Art if you ever go to Fort Collins. And it's a water feature piece, as you can see here, with the water jumping. It jumps out of the ground and into the piece. And these are like gigantic 8 feet by 8 feet black polished granite pieces that resemble sort of the moment of stillness when you've stirred chocolate and it's frozen. They have that sort of moment in them of energy, fluidity, and movement. And it's all about basically the energy coming below the ground, because Fort Collins actually wouldn't have been Fort Collins as a city today had it not been for the nature of the confluence of the rivers of the Platte and the Poudre, which actually prospered in the creation of the agriculture of the sugar beets at the time. Which brings to mind how I look at my projects. They're all about sight, the relationship of idea, the relationship of history, the audience that will participate within their experience of how they see them. They're all part of a paradigm of looking that I do a lot of research to finally uncover the link that I find tangible to be able to buy into. And with this piece, we have a few more shots here. You'll see that there's the water comes out of here and actually goes into a very narrow hole. So they're all computerized. And it jumps from one, jumps to the other, jumps to the other. You know, kind of like Las Vegas, you know. But, you know, it's okay. It's fun. And it was so much fun, actually, that they had a lot of children playing on these things. And they were worried about sort of incidences of danger and slippage. Even though there were signs saying, this is artwork, please do not climb on it. It didn't matter. And now if you go up there, you'll find that the surface has been treated with a coating on it, much like you would put on a bottom of a shower in a cheap motel to stop people slipping on it. You tell me what you think about it when you see it, but it is interesting. But this is how it is supposed to look. But I wanted these pieces to have the power, like they come out of the ground, like in 2001, where you see that object just launching out, and have that feeling in the relationship of it. I did this piece down on 1975 Pennsylvania Avenue here in Denver. It was a development complex. When I was uncovering the research of this place, it used to be a livery, which means it was a house or a stable for horses where they looked after them, where they would put their heads to rest, so to speak. Then it became a nursing home, then it became a hospital, and now it's an apartment complex. And so when I was asked to engage in this, I thought, well, there needs to be this sort of significant component of all of this. And I remember many years ago working as an orderly in a hospital, and there was this moment of opening the door to get the pillows out, and there was a stack of pillows in there. They were all stained and dirty, you know, before they got their covers on. And, you know, I just had this vision of this, so this something that to help, to assist, but also then how do I create something that's like this in its materiality? Because fiberglass wouldn't work. It's an idea, it's an image, but it doesn't have the depth of the surface of some of what I was talking about, which if you look at this stuff, you'll see the marble here, which actually comes from Marble, Colorado. We actually mined it out of the quarry in Marble, Colorado, shipped it to New Jersey, and then shipped it back here. And each one of these pillows is hand-carved, actually. And so you have this veining, this beautiful veining in these pillows that are there. And I don't know if we got some details, but you see all the puckering that I wanted. Oh. What happened? There we go. Oh, my heart went. You almost had to call 911. Oh, my goodness. But you see there's a pillow here. It was all about sort of this stack, and then they fell out. They fell over. So the embracement of this point of rest in this apartment complex, something that's funny, lighthearted, but I think we can all get. The developer liked it so much, he said, can you make me a few more for these other areas in this plaza? And I said, sure, we can make a few more. So we did, and there they are. And actually the public, general public can't see these. These are in an interior courtyard within the piece itself. Then we have the bear. I see what you mean. And actually, he's telling us that right now. She, whatever gender it is. when I found out that I was a finalist for this project, one of the mandates they said to us finalists when we were going through what we needed to do to be able to come out and generate ideas for this was actually make sure that when people are coming to Colorado that they leave with the idea of where they are. Make sure they understand the nature of it's Colorado. Well, you know, there's a lot of kitschy symbolism that's surrounding the idea about what is Colorado. And in a way, I wanted to play with that, but at the same time, I wanted to derail the icon of what we think Colorado is and its mindset. There's a mindset of Western art, however we want to look at it. There's the nature of traveling an hour outside and we start to see the nature of trinkets that we start to see. You know, the chainsawed sense of fauna and other elements that we see around us. And I went back to this and I kept on thinking, well, what is it that is Colorado? And then to me, it was when I was driving down Spear Boulevard. This is a convention center that's 2.5 million square feet of floor space, a big building. And I needed to do something that was impactful enough to ignite it so it became an integrated component of the building and not just a decorative element of a placement of an object. It needed to have a symbiotic relationship between the art and the building. Well, the building is the art, so both of them need to fit into this realm of cohesiveness. So I played around a lot with many different things, and I don't know if you've seen the Blue Bear movie, but that was a great documentary that actually illuminated the process from many different aspects. And a little plug for the director of that movie. He just won an Academy Award for Saving Face. Are you here today, Daniel? No, I don't know. But anyway, and so it was an interesting document on the nature of what that was, and we started to see how that sort of unfolded in its own process. There came the idea about thinking about when I'm driving down Spear Boulevard that I never see a sign telling me of any billboard at that point in time, what's on, who's here, who is sharing their information of the latest and greatest for whatever. So within that, I started to think about, well, okay, what could this be? And I'm inquisitive. And sure, we have the nature of our natural fauna actually moving down from the Front Range on our urban sprawl, that we're continually crossing this threshold of the natural preserve, and that became part of it as well. So once I had the idea that it needed to be a piece of fauna, the bear just seemed to sort of arise through playing with my children and uncovering the magic that it was with them. And then it's not about that. It was actually the moment that probably a lot of you don't know. It started out as a different idea of the bear and was stratified in its like contouring, actually. So it was displaced like a geologic formation of our Front Range. And then I had done an experiment. I'd taken a risk. I'd already had my proposal and presentation printed, and I was about to do my presentation, but I had this thing that I came back from the printer, the three-dimensional printer that I had an idea with. And I reduced the 450,000 triangles that this piece had here to 4,000 triangles. And it came out of the machine because it was ABS plastic. It was a fused deposition modeling machine. And I went, oh, this is cool. But I've already got all my stuff. So at the end of my presentation, and some of you may have been there, I'm not sure, I pulled out of my pocket this little blue bear that was about 5 inches high, and it was actually this color. So it was sort of something that started the relationship of now I needed to justify this. But through the courageous mentality of the city, I think, and the risk thinking that, you know, trying to tell people like me that there was an artist making a 40-foot blue bear outside the convention center. They said, what are you doing? And they said to me, what are you doing? Are you working for Disney? And I went, no, but wait and see. And so it uncovered something else, and when it went in, there was the magic that I think put it into an aura of embracement that I found very thrilling, and the humility that comes from it, I can't tell you enough of the stuff that I still get from it. And there's a lot of magic that continually fires me, even though I really don't have the tattoo on my chest. So much so that, you know, the bear gets used as another vehicle for art. And I'll let you read it. I won't read it out to you, but, you know, Zippy the pinhead, great cartoon in the paper. Hands up when you finish reading it. All right. Okay. One for the Mike Keefe in the Democratic National Convention. And then we have somebody making a book called Colorado Naked or something or other. And actually, did you read the side of this one? Can you read that? Anyway, I wanted to go on there. And then I get these emails from people all the time. I just wanted to tell you that I appreciated your work. You know, you go, oh my goodness. So it's fun. And it continually, from all over the world, the same thing happens. And I love that. And that starts to change the idea about what I think public art is. But it had to do with that engagement and how do I make something that has an entry level where, like my other stuff, that in actual fact doesn't have a hierarchical placement. It actually allows an entry level of engagement because there's a sense of familiarity within how one sees something. I'm not telling you how to see it, but I'm interested in that you have a relationship because you're not turned off by what you see. So that engagement is a cycle of understanding, and perhaps the perception and the triggering and the wiring is something that I'm allowing you to have, or permitting this engagement, or you're permitting yourself because I'm giving you the confidence to make that decision. Because how many times is it that you don't make a decision or you don't think you know something because you have a fear about not knowing what it is? You disallow that experience to enter your consciousness because of what you think you don't know. And if you had the possibility of being engaged in something that didn't put that distance between you and something else, and had just in essence the seductive element of bringing back something that you find so perhaps fascinating for whatever reason, you will trigger something. It will trigger a mechanism, and the firing happens. And I love that. There's a fine line between, like what happened in the bear as well, between teeter-tottering on something that is amusement, Disney-esque, and what else I'm trying to do. That balance is a very fine line to go on, and I'm always looking at that because I don't want to fall over one side. I want to be able to make sure that that vacillation is something that puts in a power to be able to engage another possibility. So I was brought on to do this project for the city of Aurora, which actually many years ago used to be called the town of Fletcher. Back in 1900. It was owned by this gentleman called Fletcher. And one of the interesting components of this, he decided to buy into the Denver trolley system at that point in time. And because he owned the land that was around there, he brought the trolley all the way down East Colfax. And a block from here is the original terminus. So all the way down Colfax used to be a trolley system. So that was a smart move, bringing everybody out there, start the city, bring it down. Wonderful. So I started to think, how could I bring the past back? That was a past, and it was a very vibrant past of its initial founding and the propelling of people into this dialogue of space and living and destination. So I thought about, let's bring a trolley back. So I modeled a trolley, and I'll talk about that I, meaning a lot of people that I work with actually amount to the point of that becomes me. So we'll talk about the collaboration a little bit later. So it looks a little funky. I really wanted it so that it's only 2 feet wide. So that when you traveled down East Colfax going east or west, there was one point, only one fraction of a moment of a second, when all of a sudden you thought that that was an apparition of a full-size trolley car. And I love that. You question yourself, and it's the magic of what it is. It's 20 feet long and 2 feet wide, and it kind of looks like a ghost. Some of the time I do these, I get asked to do these pieces up in Vail and do these ice sculptures, and the same sort of principles of understanding sight and where I am, and have a lot of fun of a collaboration with an ice sculptor who does a lot of carving and is very good at that and creation of ice. So I developed the concept, I work on it a little bit, and then we work together on placement. So, you know, this was a piece that was done up there. It was illuminated with LEDs. The colors change. And had to do with what Vail was actually 3 million years ago, because in the nature of what the valley was or is now, we start to see up in Minturn, you go for a walk and you'll find these little fossils of mollusks and all sorts of things on the trails. So where did they come from? They were there. That's part of our fossilized history. So I wanted to play with the sense of fossilized history in Vail in another way. So. And then when we were thinking about the idea about what we were going to do for the next year, Scott and I were on the phone, and he's going, I can't hear you. I go, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. The phone drops. I go, oh man, this is crazy. I said, we got an idea. So this is what this one is. And then a few times while I was up there, a lot of people started to get to know us and know me, and I got asked to put in for this project, which is Solaris Development, a very large project that has these condominium units that are very retail for a sizable sum, should I say. And I was brought in a way to design the plaza and work with landscape architects on the whole concept. So in that I did, and that was a lovely marriage between David's partnership and myself, and finally figuring out what we wanted to do. But I was asked to sort of create some signature works for it, and as you see here, you know, there's this piece here, and then there's this bronze element that we have here that's on this stone base, and this is a stone base as well. We have an ice skating rink. You know, there are so many parameters. And actually Kent and Vicky Logan, Kent Logan was on the town council when I was there, and I had to do many presentations to the town council to put this forward in this, because the town really wanted to see this plaza flourish as many different functions, and as a concert arena, as an ice skating rink, as a Saturday flea market kind of thing that they could do for a farmer's market and so forth. So we had to try and think about how we could move it and create an entry place that became exciting and wonderful for the plaza to exist. During the day it's very different than it is at night. You see that on this one we had fire in here. There's a little bit of fire there. These bubbles are all illuminated remotely. Each bubble is completely separate in its nature of its computerized control. Jenlyn Musk is the artist that worked with me on that component of the lighting. And I want to talk about that because this is the piece that I'll start to talk about, the collaboration of many people making a project like this, I feel successful, and how that it wouldn't have happened without the knowledge and perhaps the risk-taking that a lot of these other people take, including Richard, my lawyer. So there's a couple of shots here. So all of this was designed, you know, by me in collaboration with David's partnership of what we had to do with the site relationship of what was existing. There's a parking structure underneath here. So we have this formation. There was a divine proportion element that I was trying to sort of fit into the nature of where we wanted this to be. So water became something that I was interested in, the nature of veil, probably because I was talking about that other thing before as well. And I worked with an animator, and we created densities and parameters of molecules, if you want, these bubbles, and how speed that they would go, the speed that they would go through, the density. We finally got something that was coming out of a pipe that looked really good. I said, okay, Randy, this is really good. I love this. Let's freeze it, and let's put a structure around it. So we put a structure around it, and then every other bubble that didn't fit fell off. And we ended up basically, I say, with the form that we have here. Because economically, if we tried to make it that same way, this actually is replicated. There's 4 components that are replicated. So it's one piece that's replicated 4 times around it, which actually is an amazing piece of engineering. Oh, I'm glad I put these movies in. I get a chance to drink some water. The idea was that I wanted to upset that equilibrium, that when you go in for a martini, you can see that this is sped up. When you go in for a martini at 3 o'clock and you come out at 7, you thought it was green when you went in, well, it's orange when you come out. And you go, well, that was a good drink. And there are millions of combinations that we could have done. Millions. And to try and pick the colors that worked with the material that we had. That was the key. We played around for a long time. This project took a long time to make, and a lot of patience with the fabricators in many different places. The bases were all made in China. This was the piece was made in basically in California in Napa Valley by Chrysler and Associates, a wonderful partner of mine and dear friend now. Who actually made the bear. So that's why I was going to talk about the production of the bear, but the same principles of dedication and risk-taking are undertaken by him and his team of what he's able to do. This piece captured 270 molds that we needed to do for these bubbles. So each of these pieces, these ones here, actually the green one is better, isn't it? They're all milled, and then we had to make a mold for the whole section. These look like edamame or something right now, don't they? And that's a quarter. So that was the quarter that needed replicating 4 times. And you'll see here that we have the LEDs that we were putting in. How do we do this? Well, that was an amazing part of genius of Jen's to be able to figure out how we could do that, and David, her partner. How do we get the color through the material that actually is a mold? That is a piece that has 2 parts to it. Because the only way you could make something like that is to make 2 pieces that you put together. So how do you make that seem invisible? Boy, it's hard. And it was an experiment, a big experiment on Bill's side, and it took a long time to be able to do it. But you can start to see here, see how we did it? And this is prior to the final coating of what we put on here. So we had to, Jen had to go out there with David many times to be able to put the lights in, and then we covered it up, sealed it, and finally at different stages of development, then we finally put the final coating on of what we were doing. And then at Artworks Foundry in California and San Francisco, we built this piece that was a sort of a very unusual piece for Piero to build, because he'd never built anything as precise as this. And if you talk to a foundry, it's very difficult to be able to control the material, because you have a positive that you start with. It may be perfect, but you've got a mold that you need to make. You have wax that goes in it. You have to melt the wax out to be able to have the mold that you do to be able to pour the bronze in. All those processes, there's a possible deviation that can happen, and hard to control. But he did a great job considering what we had, so challenge. I was very fastidious how I wanted this, in particular, how I wanted the surface to look. So it was rough on the bottom, had a polish mark where you could sit down, and then the wall of this looked kind of like pigskin at the top, and then a polished top to it out of black granite. And these are the 4 pieces that you can start to see here, you know, and what we have here, that surface. Very seductive surface, and you know, I love it. It was beautiful. And you know, part of it is that the amazing embracement of these people taking on the risk and the love that they had for the work that we were doing together. And I can't tell you, none of these things were profitable for any of these fabricators. It was because we were creating something unique that challenged the processes of what they thought they knew to something else. And that level of what they did brought them to another level. For instance, Bill, when he was working on the bear, figured out a way of producing something that actually engaged another mechanism of development that permitted him to be able to make large fiberglass panels for building structures for Frank Gehry that was self-supporting and self-engineered into the panels. And because of the technology that they had put forward in the bear, it opened up something else. And the same thing within each one of these things. It opens up other possibilities. Not saying, I can't do it, let's give it a try. And I love that. And, you know, if you know Piero, if any of you said, you can't believe that he's standing on here polishing this piece. Installation's always a problem, and a time-consuming process, and very nerve-wracking for me because, you know, you've done all this work over this period of time. You know what it looks like when it was in the shop, and transport and installation can have different degrees of variation of completion. So there we have the shot here. All right. I did this piece for the University of Houston, and it was a courtyard for graduate student housing. And this is what this is, a new building, just got completed. And actually this piece is just finished right now. This paving around here is 2-inch granite pavers that I designed the shape around here. I was interested in trying to think of something that became a universal for the idea about how we could find something internationally that's connective. And a gourd was something that I just had a fascination for anyway, as a beautiful object and something in a form that has a resonance for a sense of magic as an instrument, as a utilitarian object, as something that's transcended time for its own being. It was something that I really had an affinity with. So I really wanted to try and make some. And I'm going to go through quickly about how we start to make it. And this is sort of some of the complex digital association of what that is, and bear with me a little bit. So I started out creating a tiled surface on a gourd, and this one was for the red one that you saw, the red Indian granite one. So I changed it again, and we ended up with this surface that's a black and white surface that I would use as a displacement map on the surface of the gourd. So it's all uniform, it's wrapped around there. Now, how does something like that get made? With great difficulty. One piece of stone. You start to see how it's up here, how it's cut down here and shaped. Now, I'm a board member, a founding board member of the Digital Stone Project back in New Jersey, and we have a facility that actually could make something like this. But they couldn't make something like this because the nature of what I asked them to do, of what I really wanted in here, a machine could not do. And it's funny, I'm really interested in the relationship between the creation of what is created digitally on the computer and the craft that can happen through the act of making something. So the hand changes that digital perfect specimen into something else because there are mistakes. They may not be recognizable mistakes, but that imbues a sense of humanity to something that was created in such a sterile environment. And I loved the magic of that translation between that. That, to me, just like thrilled me with this, you know, stuff when I see it. It's just like puts the hairs on your arm up. You know, I just love it, really. And to see what they're capable of doing. Look at this. So we were actually, just a little side note here, one of the things and the magic of working with this studio that I love is I told Mr. Wong we were having problems trying to figure out how do we want the surface to go on this project here. How do I want this to be? So, you know, he said, there's no way we can polish it all. And I went, yeah, I know it's going to cost a lot more money. I know we've only bid this much, but you know, I don't think I had envisioned originally that it was going to be a honed surface, which is reducing the sheen of it to something else. And then we're going to play around with it. Well, I go back from one of my trips, and I come back 2 weeks later, and I find out, well, actually a little longer, 2 months later probably, and the piece was all polished. And both of the pieces, the two pieces that they did for me. Actually, what's interesting, you start to see the other one here. See on here, this other shape. So this is how the other one happened. It was all about weaving. First one was steps. Next one was a weave. The next one was a patch. Had to do with the idea of education, of what I started to think about. The stairs, the climbing, the weaving of knowledge, and then the patchwork of being able to assimilate and put all this together in a particular way. You may not read it as that, and I'm okay, but this is how this started in the idea and the generation of those ideas. A 65,000 pound block had to be moved from the quarry with special permission down to where we had to fabricate this. This was the third block because the first two had cracks in it. This gives you an idea about what it is to be able to sort of make something like this with these amazing craftspeople. The only time you get to see this is when you're up on another floor in that building. Of course, putting it in is another thing. You know, I don't think of some of these things sometimes. So I had to get it in this doorway. There are 3 of these particular pieces of machinery in this country that can do this. One, fortunately, happened to be in Houston. Otherwise, I could not have got this in. It weighs 48,000 pounds, 24 ton, one solid piece of block of stone. And this one took about 9 months to get here because it didn't fit in a container. Bad design. I learned. And cost me 5 times the amount that it would normally have cost, but that's another thing. So here we are. And the piece is called Your Move, because I think they're kind of like, it's your move in education, but they remind me of these pieces that when you play tokens for games and things. There we go. You know, the little side note, I shipped all this stone, the 2-inch granite that I designed to fit in here, and the installers broke it. Many pieces. And we just finished, actually, I shipped more stone back, and we just had another company come in, pull it all out and put it back in. Now it's finished, and it is beautiful. I got asked to sort of put in for this project at the Sacramento Airport, and this is the last one I'll talk about because I think we're going on time here. And I was fascinated by the idea of what air travel is, and you know what we do continually. And I travel a lot now, as you can tell. I seem like it's a long commute to my studio, to China, but this. Starting to think about what goes on. There's everything, the energy, the tension that you have when you go to the airport, what you have to put in your pockets, what you have to take out of your pockets, what you've got to remember, all the stuff, the cacophony of energy. If you could bottle that, you could probably fly the plane with all that stuff, right? And it's amazing. So I started to think about all that. And when I was engaged in this, and there were 3 of us who were given sites, myself and Christian Moeller were given the main airport terminal, which is this one, and Donald Lipsky was given the air side. This is the new Terminal B at Sacramento Airport, and to come out with something. I started to think about, baggage. What is the element that is our baggage? When your bag arrives at the airport and you pick up your object and it finally arrives, you go, oh, great, I'm home, or I can now make my journey. So all the stuff that is you, which is not anybody else's, is you, makes you sort of feel complete. If it's not there, man, you feel messed up, I know you needed that special toothbrush, and it's not there. Whatever, your special underwear, whatever it is in that case, it's you. It's not anybody else's. And I think that that's what's interesting about that, is that sort of we have that. And I started to think about the metaphors associated with the idea of what we do with our baggage, that connection between the physical, that is our stuff, and the not so physical in our stuff. The connection between what is it that we bring with us everywhere. The same way as what we look at art, we look at things, what we experience. What is the baggage that we align ourselves with that we start to engage and permit an experience or disallow an experience because of the baggage. And that, I wanted to make a suitcase. It started out with a suitcase. And how do I make something that's about the suitcase, about the baggage, but make it interesting? Well, I would put the baggage down in baggage claim. And this is the baggage, a piece of suitcase. But then I started to think, what could I use to be a vehicle by which the viewer could actually bring themselves to the point of the relationship of what I want with the suitcase. The rabbit is actually jumping into the suitcase. I did a lot of different rabbits. We did a lot of different modeling and all sorts of things to be able to get this. And believe me, I fought the idea of the rabbit because I did not want to be titled the animal guy, because then I'd have to get another tattoo. It was just something that I just, I fought it. I really did. But then the magic came back about what it is about a rabbit. It goes through centuries of connections to fables, to stories, to the young, to the old. Everything in between is about the magic of a story. We all have one. There are much more contemporary stories that we have today that we understand, but there's also something that we as individuals can relate to. Now, this has to do with also thinking about what the airport is, which actually has an outside area that you can go to and sit down, and it's part of the fields, and actually the airport at some point in time can be expanded. And I love the idea of thinking the outside is in, because through all this glass, the building is amazingly glass here. You have an amazing vista here on this south side to see what's going on in the fields and the garden. And actually there's a Yorme Plensa piece they're going to put outside there with a water feature. And so I love that idea of being able to bring the outside in. And so there needed to be something with that. And there needed to be, I felt, something in this space. We needed to illuminate it in another way. It was a beautiful building, and I loved all the sort of the elements of architectural details that we have. That was sort of magical. But I felt there needed to be something else. And as I said, I fought the idea of the rabbit, and but it won. And it has to do with those stories and the relationship that I feel that you, as the spectator, when you go there, can actually relate to. That connection between you and a story, the generation of what that is, and how, when it's jumping into the suitcase, which actually is the size of a queen bed, and you start to see the relationship between what that is here, at that liquid vortex that you saw on the other one. You see it here. So it's the suitcase is opening up. And, you know, in this photograph, actually, because of the way the lens is, it's distorted it. But it's opening up like the hole is opening up for the rabbit to dive into. So it's coming from the outside into the suitcase. You know, great idea, but how do you make it? And fit within the budget, which are many part of the constraints that I always have to deal with. So this is the queen-size stone suitcase. And I wanted to sort of share some of those stories about what this is as well quickly. You see the process of how it takes a block. All this was made on the computer first of all, and then we printed it out, and then we cast it. And then I had to take it to China. But actually before that, on one of my trips back, I had to pick it up in San Francisco, bring it back to Denver. Well, it got checked on all that stuff there by TSA. And I got to tell you, when I went to China, they didn't even worry about it. It was really funny. There was no TSA tape on it or anything. But we patinaed it to look exactly the same, and it was all modeled uniquely from a variety of different things. So how do you make a suitcase, actually? Well, I'll go back. How do you make something that is pretty bland in its form and shape into something that's exciting? Well, I figured the hardware needed to be that sort of catalyst to be able to ignite something. So a combination of Louis Vuitton in 1928 and further Samsonite additions to figure out what we needed to do. The stitching on the leather here all became part of it. And, you know, I had to go there and bring it all with me and see how we could fit it. And there were a couple of mistakes I didn't foresee. But, well, you know, it was really heavy. So we had to carve out the inside. And we were still really worried about it. So that was what that last slide was. You saw how much material we had to take out. And there's the surface, which is now a receptacle for pennies, quarters. I should have had a little drawer underneath, you know, that sort of I got. But even the stone, this sort of texturing of what we have here is the same stone. It's polished, it's honed. But like the beading here, these little details, all became something that I was very interested in sort of creating, the realism. And one of the things you don't really understand sometimes is all this takes a lot of work and time by engineers and people with, you know, I think a lot smarter than me in many ways of thinking about how they can put this stuff together. And fortunately, they do. And I just put these in so you could see the complexity of what these drawings are and actually how beautiful they are because of the nature of what they are. And how it is not an easy task to make, especially because we were going to make it out of composite materials in the first stages. One of the things is it this one? No. Yeah. We were going to Sikorsky sky crane it in from American Canyon, and then they were going to leave a window open, and actually they had a YouTube video, I think, that they did on one point in time when we went out there, and they told us that, no, that's going to be all closed up. You're going to have to figure out to get it through the luggage doors, baggage claim. I went, we got a 56-foot rabbit that's 18 feet wide by 40, and you're trying to tell me I got to get it through baggage claim? How is that going to happen? We've already started this thing. Well, we had to restart it and remake it. We made it all out of aluminum. And it's actually two rabbits. There's a rabbit on the inside and there's a rabbit on the outside. The rabbit on the outside is panels. So there are 1,760 panels that are on the outside of the rabbit. And this is what you start to see as the relationship of the aluminum panels in relationship like you would build an airplane, all these structure here. But that's just the shell of the inner rabbit. Then you have a steel structure on the inside. And these panels were all actually machine cut up in Washington where they make I mean, the people that are involved in all of this is just amazing. So this was made up in Washington where they make Coast Guard cruisers. So they have all the equipment to be able to make and number these things. And it's incredible what they do. So then we now have to figure out how we're going to do this. And there's a little animation quick thing. Start to see how we had to tell them how we were going to do it now that they just made it more difficult for us. So these aren't how it gets fastened. It gets fastened by 7 cables because of seismic loads. And then the cables that we strung up there, first of all, had to be specially made to be able to go onto this column here, this beam, so that we could hoist it up by other points that we have on the structure of it. The rabbit itself on the inside here is just a steel structure that we're pulling it up by. Took us 3 months to build it inside the airport. And it looks like something like out of ironclads, you know, there's sort of these Civil War submarines or something when it was on the ground. And everybody's going, well, I thought it was red. It's black. So what you start to see are all these little standoffs. Well, that's how we Velcroed the red panels on. Yeah, I'm waiting for it. See? So there's an inner rabbit, and then there's the outer rabbit. What I was interested in is trying to create these floating panels. And no photograph that I will show you actually shows it in the way, unless you look at something like this of its fabrication, if you start to see it. But because there isn't that element of what you see, because it becomes blurred in a black line. But the black line is a negative space, and you start to see, if you were there, how it does float in a very different way. Yeah, so everyone is tethered. And then if you're putting these together in a particular way, imagine if you're like 1/4 of an inch out, you know, here. God, by the time you get to the end of the 56-foot long rabbit and its foot, you got a problem. You're going to have to juxtaposition this. So special tools were made to be able to fit and place in here at every point, that we could make sure that when we placed these panels, we were in exactly the right position that we needed to be. You can start to see, depending on the light that you have, depends on how transparent the piece is. Of course, there has to be commentary everywhere you go. And this was just before I gave my presentation. There was a front page article at the County Board of Supervisors that day. This was in the paper in the Sacramento Bee. And then I arrived off the airplane, and actually there were a lot of press and things, and I was thinking, oh my God, somebody's going to shoot me or something, because there's a lot of stuff going on. But beautiful piece in so many ways, I think, but captures the imagination, because I wanted, as you came down, there are 3 stories that you saw from this end. The rabbit became a wayfarer guide, so it took you down visually to the baggage claim. From where you saw up here, you arrive from the people mover, and you go all the way down to the basement here of where the baggage claim is. And so you're preoccupied by that, and it becomes a wonderful interlude and a moment of disruption of what you thought. So there's another possibility. And then when you realize that there's a suitcase down there, you may apply the connection that I think creates the magic. They're coming from the outside in here. Lots of shots here. And the aspects of things that are most important to us are hidden because of their simplicity and familiarity. Thank you.
Lawrence, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to open it up for questions now, and I'd like to ask for you to raise your hand, and we'll bring a mic to you. Because we are recording tonight, we do need for you to speak in the mic, please. So, who would like to start?
Great, no questions. Clark.
Those are really incredible projects. I'm amazed. And 2 things that I was really wondering about. I don't know if it's that maybe this is too many questions. But one is, it seems to me that there must have been, in the initial selection project or process of these projects, there must have been some resistance on the committee that could select. Could you at all discuss what happened at the selection process?
There's an interesting process that happens, and you know, each of them are different because of the many people that are involved in it. And sometimes there's a public art committee that's run by the city. Sometimes that is made up and should be made up of community members, artists, administrators, and so forth. You know, there are many stories, but some of them aren't necessarily appropriate for this audience. But there is a difference, and I could start to see within each of those things, and I could start to see when I present something in a committee situation by the questions that they're asking me, whether, you know, what I have done has been a viable option for their interest, and does it work for their space. And other times, you know, I see there's an element of engagement, and I mean, the rabbit piece, for example, was kind of interesting because I was very resistant to the idea of the rabbit, and I remember Shelley Willis, who was the public art coordinator for the city of Sacramento, sort of, you know, asking me, "What do you got, Lawrence? What do you got?" I go, "Well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to laugh." And then I told her, she goes, "Oh, that's great." I went, "Oh, whew, okay." But because I had another one. Usually I work on things, and through that synthesis of research and stuff and what I want to do on working on a project, I have more than one idea. And depending on how much time that I have, it depends on sort of the relationship of how much I pursue that second idea. But the committees are, you know, it's a crapshoot. They really are. And I don't know if that's answering your question specifically, Clark, but there's a lot. It's not necessarily the committee. Once it goes through to the county board of supervisors, say for the Sacramento one, that was a nightmare. No, that really was a nightmare, because I had this woman who was it was like going to, I felt like I was being actually hung, because I was in the court box kind of thing, and all the judges are up there, and they're like, you know, oak desk thing miles back, you know, and then there was the audience wing, and I felt like I was in Parliament or something. It was absolutely crazy. And then this woman who was the county board, one of the supervisors, kept on calling it a bunny, deliberately. Well, I don't like the bunny. You know, bunnies mean procreation. What's that mean about Sacramento? I mean, my God, you know. So, yeah, there's some funny things. Fortunately, though, there are those that have the wisdom, you know, and I think I embrace that, what they can see, and take the risk, because it is a risk, you know. I mean, it is a risk in some of those things, because a lot of people can't get it. And I will tell you that actually, there was more publicity about the rabbit in Sacramento than there was about the bear, that thing, even though we had a lot of stuff going on. But that raised so many issues within the community there that I did get calls. I mean, I got calls, not just emails. I got calls from people who tracked me down and called on the positive side and on the negative side. But it was, I think it became the press's responsibility to articulate the reason of where that funding came from. It was an $850,000 project, and the city can't understand it. People, when their brother is a fireman and gets laid off, it's a natural cause to say, well, you're spending that amount of money on a rabbit. It doesn't make any sense, you know. But in the end, in the long term of all of that, we start to realize, in a way, what the bear here has done for the city of Denver. And that's a magical thing that no amount of money could really do for the publicity of what it's done. It really is. I mean, it really is interesting. So, thanks. Does that answer your question? All right. I know you could.
Do we have any other questions? Okay.
Did you have a reaction or a thought to the crocheted ball and chain that was attached to the blue bear?
Loved it. You know, it's interesting, because I had a I gave another talk last year for some symposium that Richard and I were on, I think. And there was somebody in the audience who asked me that. And the same thing, I think they were part of it, just to see how I think, you know, because they probably couldn't ask me any other way. But I have friends of friends and friends who have connections. And I think, no, I think that was a wonderful enterprise, and it didn't change the physicality of the bear. But I will tell you, the bear did get graffitied like a month after it got put in, and had to be resurfaced because of it. It was very severely damaged, and the high tech, if you want to call it that, is the acid in paintballs, and blasted the rear end with pink paintballs that had acid in it. And then I get a call telling me, oh, you know, there's pink paintballs have been on the rear end of the, oh, that's fun, you know, great, okay, they just wash this off with a power washer or something. And they go, no, 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 it's the pink's gone, but now there are these etch marks down the side of all the legs. So the bear's actually been redone from the, and that was like 3 weeks afterwards, so that was very difficult. If you can imagine what it's like to get another crew in, be able to bring it all in, do it all there on a very different scale than when you're in your shop and the controlled atmosphere that you have to be able to do something like that. It's very difficult. So, but no, that was actually, it was fun, and wonderful project, good cause. Yeah.
We could take one more question before we invite you all over to the reception. Are there any takers? Yep.
I just wanted to say thank you for your art. It's very inspiring. I'm sculpture major, and I had a question. When you were developing your bear, which program did you use? Because I'm in currently digital 3D fabrication class, and I'm still trying to find a program that would meet my needs. And I just
You're obviously not at the University of Denver, because I'm teaching that class right now. Well, actually, I teach Rhino in that because there's a basis of the NURBS modeling that I think is very comparable with a lot of the production people that I work with. And designing-wise, though, I work within many different aspects of ZBrush, my Mudbox, and then Rhino as well for some basic things. But you brought up a good question. That some of the things that I didn't really attend to in my talk that I missed is there are amazing people, and I would not be able to do what I do without some of the teamwork of some of these individuals that help me continually through the nth hour to be able to get what we need to get done. So it's the computer people that I work with. I only know so much, and I only care to know so much, probably is the point, because it gets a little bit ridiculous. But I have enough to get me in danger, and that's probably the problem, that we have to remake it or something, but at least the idea is there. So I like that, but you know, there is this amazing thing that I love about all the people that I work with that embrace all those different possibilities and can do that. It's a challenge sometimes, but it is also something that I think we work together to create something that is unique in its own possibility and has a magic because of that energy that people have put into it. From all sorts, from the guy painting the outside of the blue bear to all the people who are developing it along. I mean, the bear alone had 85 people that had a hand in making it, you know, that sort of essence. And I love that, you know, and just driving on the country roads to where I have to go to the studio in China and going, you know, the first time I did it, I was in the unknown land, and there was something about the magic of letting go of fear, mind you, of not knowing where I was going. But it brought me back to that, thinking that had the same energy that I really loved. And it has to do with that I can now, you know, because of what I've done, I have the relationship and commitment of these individuals to see their projects through in the way that they know that they can be realized as well. So now we're in a good marriage, and I think that's really good. But I hope that answers with
yes,
the
thank
project.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you again, Lawrence.
You're welcome. Thanks.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, and please do join us for our reception just across the way at Mad Wine. Thank you. Merlot waiting.